Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is John McDougall. I am the event coordinator here at Murder by the Book in Houston, and we're super excited about tonight's event, and we appreciate everyone tuning back in for us once we got rescheduled. But before we get started, while everybody is waiting to get the notification that we've gone live and finding us from their various corners of the internet, I'll just do some general store announcement stuff, let you guys know what's going on with us. So we are doing in-store events again. We started them in January. We've probably done about a dozen so far. So we hope that you will take a look at the store's calendar. You'll see things listed either as in-store or virtual. At the moment, we have not started streaming the in-store stuff live just yet, but on Saturday, April 30th, just a little bit less than a month from now, is going to be Independent Bookstore Day, and we're going to be doing one of our Murder by the Book recommends presentations at 1 o'clock that day, and we're going to try to live stream it while we're also in the store talking. So it's going to be our guinea pig. So I hope you guys will check that out. We figured if we were going to do it, we would rather do it one where it's just us talking. So if it cuts out in the middle of it, it's not, you guys are losing the connection to an author. So we hope that you guys will check that out. We've got a lot of stuff happening for Independent Bookstore Day too. You can find all of that information on the website. As I mentioned, we are doing virtual and in-store stuff. We've also been, we're still partnering with our partner, Sarah DeVello, for virtual stuff. So she is actually going to be talking with Sean Cosby on Monday the 4th at 6 Central. She's going to be talking with him about the paperback release of Razorblade Tears. So make sure you guys come back in for that. But to get us started for tonight, we are going to be chatting with Alex Segura, whose book Secret Identity is now out, and S.A. Cosby, or Sean Cosby, whose book Razorblade Tears will be out in paperback on Monday. Wanted to mention, if you have not picked up Alex's book yet, we do still have a handful of signed copies left. I've dropped a link in the comments where you can order a copy of those. So I'm going to get these gentlemen brought out so we can get started. While they are talking tonight, if you have questions for either of them, you can post those in the live chat on YouTube or the comments on Facebook, and we will leave some time towards the end of the chat to get to those. But first, we are going to bring out Alex. How are you tonight, Alex?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. It's good to see you again.
Yeah. This will be fun. I'm excited.
We're so excited to celebrate the release of Secret Identity. As I mentioned, we've got signed copies. And for those of you who might not be familiar, Alex Segura is the SVP Sales and Marketing at Oni Press and the author of Star Wars Poe Dameron Freefall and the acclaimed Pete Fernandez Mystery series. He has also written a number of comic books, most notably the superhero noir The Black Ghost, the YA music series The Archies, and the Archie Meets collection of crossovers. A Miami native, he lives in New York City with his wife and children. And we're happy to have Sean Cosby with us tonight. Let me bring him out. How are you tonight, Sean?
I'm doing well. Thank you guys for having me.
Thanks for coming.
For doing this. So as I mentioned to everybody, Sean's book, Razorblade Tears, is his most recent release that will be out in paperback on Monday. He is the Anthony Award-winning writer from Southeastern Virginia. He's the author of the New York Times bestseller Razorblade Tears and Blacktop, Wasteland, which won the Los Angeles Times Book Prize and was a New York Times notable book, and was also named a Best Book of the Year by NPR, The Guardian, and Library Journal, among others. When not writing, he is an avid hiker and chess player. And also wanted to mention, well, we have lost Sean, so we're going to get a second to see for him to pop back in. I also wanted to mention for anybody who is tuning in, if you guys are not familiar, we have a subscription service called Murder by the Box. And Alex's book, Secret Identity, was our most recent pick, and Sean's book, Razorblade Tears, was also a pick last year.
Thanks so much.
That you can visit murderbythebox.com or look at the Murder by the Book website. There's Sean. There we go. Can you hear us, Sean?
Yeah, can you guys hear me? I'm sorry I dropped out. I apologize. We're
no worries.
Some Dorothy over the Wizard of Oz weather here, so that might be what's going on. So if you see a witch fly by,
keep those slippers on. Keep your slippers on.
Perfect. So since we've got both of them, I'm going to turn the chat over to Sean. I will be keeping watch backstage. So if Sean, if you pop out again, I will hop back in to keep things going. So don't worry about it. As I mentioned, I see some viewers already mentioning they're glad to check in. So if you guys have questions while they're chatting, please post those in the comments and we'll get to them in a bit. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to you, gentlemen, and I will see you in just a little bit.
Thanks, John. All right. Here we are.
All right.
Good to see you, man.
buddy.
Yeah, it's
I
been a
didn't know we
while.
would be matching tonight.
I know, yeah. I was like, huh. When I saw you in the green room, I was like, we're twins today. It's me trying to be rural noir. How's it going?
I know, right? That's my brand, man. Why you biting? No.
Yeah, it's your brand.
I'm doing all right.
It's more
man.
yours than mine.
Like, I'm doing good, man. I was just talking to somebody, did an interview recently, talking about our I guess infamous panel at BoucherCon 2018, the Southern Crime Fiction panel, which was a lot of fun. Even
that was legendary.
The comments that weren't questions, it was a blast.
I mean, yeah, that was such great
person,
company.
I said, I've done a lot of panels since then, but that was the one that made me feel like, wow, I'm really a writer, because I'm here with these real writers. I'm here with Steph Post and Ace Atkins and Eric Pruitt and Alex Segura.
That was a great panel. I think we lost Sean for a second, but the panel he's referring to was one we did at BoucherCon in St. Pete, and it was a Southern Noir panel. And Sean had just come out with his debut novel, and that's where he met his agent, Josh, who's also my agent. Hey, John.
Hello. Yeah, so we have lost Sean, so we will while we were waiting for him to pop back in. Alex, do you want to give us the elevator pitch for the new book?
Yeah, for sure. Secret Identity is my new novel. It's set in New York, 1975, and it follows Carmen Valdez, who's a queer Cuban-American woman who moves from Miami to New York to pursue her dream of working in comic books. She grows up reading comic books. It's a strong connection point between her and her dad. She gets a job at this small publisher, a third-rate publisher called Triumph Comics, as a secretary to the CEO, and she starts pitching him ideas. And in the early part of the book, we see a scene where the boss basically says, look, it's not going to happen for you. You're my secretary. It would just be weird for me to give you work. I've got a whole line of people that I want to keep employed. So don't worry, I have plans for you. And this is, of course, disheartening to Carmen, who she didn't sign up to just be a secretary. She wants to write comics. And so she's approached by a colleague, this junior editor, Harvey, who says, I've got this opportunity to launch the first female superhero for Triumph Comics, but I need your help. I need somebody to help me write it. It's due very soon, and I know you want to write. The only catch is she has to do it anonymously, and Carmen is very smart. She sees the red flags throughout this idea, but it's her dream. So she co-writes this character. It launches. It becomes a huge hit, and then Harvey is murdered. And nobody knows that Carmen had anything to do with this character, the legendary Lynx, and she has to basically investigate his murder to reclaim this character. And interspersed throughout the murder mystery are actual comic book sequences drawn by Sandy Jarrell. Let me see if I can pull one up just to give you a sense of what it looks like. I should be more faster about this, but every few chapters you'll see like a page or two or a couple pages where you see the actual comic books for the legendary Lynx, and it's they're kind of in meta conversation with each other. So what happens in the comic book is kind of reflected in the prose.
So how did that process come about with getting those comic pages? Was that something that, did you potentially like pick out certain scenes that you wanted to be illustrated, or did an editor recommend them? How did that come about?
When I was working on the book, I think before we started shopping it, I had marked out little interludes. Like I knew there would be certain sequences that would respond to the story itself. And so before we pitched it to Flatiron as a partial, I had a big chunk written, and then I had Sandy, the artist, draw a page just to kind of have proof of concept. And so that's what we showed to Zach at Flatiron, and kind of, I think, what really showed what the book was going to be, that we would have these prose sequences, and then you would kind of shift into comic books as a breather, but they would also complement the main story. I didn't want it to be like perfunctory, where it just felt like, oh, he's just doing it to show off. I wanted it to really echo the main story.
I see. Let's see if Sean is... Sean, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you guys
good?
Hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear us?
Okay, I'm coming back on. I'm sorry.
No worries.
I don't on. Will that like make the signal a little stronger? So let me, if I can just turn the camera off, and then if you can you still hear my voice?
Yeah.
Yeah.
don't know if it's just because I'm ugly or what, ends up staying on a little stronger without the camera.
No worries. Yeah, whatever works.
But
I was just giving the elevator pitch.
let's see if we can. Yeah, man. I guess. Oh no, I'm glad you did because I love the book. I would have held up a copy of it, but I loaned it out because
Thanks,
really
man.
love it that much. I'm making people read it. So
That means the world to me.
I
That's
wanted
amazing.
to ask you about. Like, oh man, no, I've got a lot of friends and family that are comic book fans that are also mystery fans. And I guess the first thing I want to ask you before the signal drops out again is how different was this from the?
How different was it from the Pete books? It was I think there's some comfort to be had when you're writing a series. You have the same supporting characters, whether the ones that you keep alive. You have the kind of tentpole parts of the mystery series that you can rely on. But with something like Secret Identity, it felt much more cinematic and it was much more character driven. I don't want to say it's quieter, it's just more character focused, whereas the Pete books are about a character arc, but they're very action oriented. There's explosions, there's murders, there's shootouts, there's big action. But Secret Identity felt much more in the vein of like Patricia Highsmith or those kind of not quieter and more haunting and atmospheric books, and with the backdrop of comics, which was kind of the goal.
So what was the impetus for this one too? Because as we mentioned in your bio, you've done comics and comics have been part of your career for a while. What made you decide to do comics this time, and why do you think you didn't do it before you did the Pete books?
I don't think I was ready. I always knew I wanted to do something with comics in prose. I just didn't. I don't think there's any shame in saying it. I just don't think I had the chops. Like my first book, Silent City, I really wanted to show that I could write a book. I wanted to see if I could do it. I wanted to see if I could write a PI novel. And I think there's great comfort in those kind of subgenres. You know what the tropes are. I knew like what I wanted to flip and be cute about, but I still had that kind of safety net of a PI novel. And with Secret Identity, I needed to get my sea legs from those first 6 novels and really kind of understand how to do it and really play with the form a little bit more. So I really, the kind of books that really move me are the mystery novels that take you somewhere else, that teach you about a different world, a different industry, a different place or perspective. And I wanted to bring that to Secret Identity. I wanted to show comics as a really fun setting for a murder mystery. The same way, someone like Megan Abbott can take you into a gymnastics world, and there's you can see the noir elements kind of filter through, or cheerleading, and these unexpected scenarios where noir is prevalent.
Perfect. And so, because you're writing about kind of the comic world, how much of your own, obviously you're going to draw on your own experience, but how much of the stuff that happens in the book, like a person taking over a comic and, kind of essentially being a ghostwriter and stuff like that, how much of that was actually based on things that you had witnessed over your career?
Yeah, it's interesting because I went into it thinking it would not be that research intensive. I thought, okay, I know comics, like I've read comic book history books, I can just kind of write this book. But I also realized early on that I needed it to feel like it happened. I needed that verisimilitude. I needed it to feel accurate and like it fit into history. So it ended up becoming the most research intensive book I've ever written. I had to interview people that worked in comics at the time. I spoke to a lot of women that worked in comics at the time just to kind of get their perspective and understand that and see if what I was doing like felt accurate, not so much the murder, but, the idea that as a woman, you could write this character and then lose credit. And there is a precedent in comic book history for these kind of like tragic tales. Like Bill Finger, who co-created Batman, was never credited until well after his death, like because the artist Bob Kane had struck a deal with DC that kind of boxed him out. So, comics is full of stories like that where people don't get the proper credit or lose control of their characters. And I wanted to evoke that, but it took a lot of research, took a lot of reading, which was fun. It wasn't like homework. It was like obsessive fun, like reading these history books about comics. And I got to talk to some of my heroes, just interviewing them, like Paul Levitz, who was the CEO and president and publisher at DC Comics. And he read the book and like fact checked it, which I was like, this is amazing. Or, Jerry Conway, who wrote like stories like The Death of Gwen Stacy and Firestorm. Like he spoke to me for like 2 hours and just gave me the funniest anecdotes that ended up in the book. And it felt like I was bringing a lot of this stuff to life and bringing life to those characters, which is what you want as a writer. Hey, Sean, sorry.
No, you're fine, man. I don't know. I'm so sorry. I want to apologize
It's
to everyone
okay.
watching.
No worries.
We're having a really bad storm here, so I don't know if I'm dropping in and out, but I did enjoy hearing about the research for the book and talking about Bob Kane and Bill Finger and how people get iced out of creations. Yeah. And it's a brutal world now, creativity and stuff. I wanted to ask you, since you're a huge comic book fan like I am, and are there any ideas or thoughts of maybe taking the Lethal Links and making her a real comic book, like a limited run or something like that? Or anybody said anything about that?
Yeah, I think we're going to do it. I think we're going to do it so meta that my name might not even be on it. I think we're going to make it seem like it actually is a reprint collection from the 70s, like with one of my favorite comic book writers. I won't name them until they actually turn it in, but they read the book and they sent me a message and they said this was fantastic. And I said, do you want to write the intro to the graphic novel? So he's going to write the intro as if he was inspired by the Lynx comics, like kind of really treating it like this existed and like really meta. And Sandy's going to draw it. So yeah, that was kind of the long-term dream. I was like, if this book hits and people care, like we'll do a comic and make it seem like it really fit into the history of the world.
That's amazing. I love that. Another thing I love about the book is I love old school New York. I love grimy, dirty, nasty Times Square. Just a hair above the Warriors, but below Escape from New York. And I thought you really evoked that sort of Serpico era New York City. And for somebody who's not a New York City native, but you've been there a long time, I thought you really were able to kind of sink your teeth into that. Is that something, I guess it's obviously something that fascinates you, but is that something that you've wanted to write about for a while?
Yeah, I mean, when I first started writing, I wanted to try and write a New York novel, but I wasn't ready yet. I knew Miami, I knew Pete, I knew that world, and so that was what I started with. But I've always wanted in my heart to tell a great New York crime novel, but I didn't want it to be modern day New York because not anything. I just wanted to evoke that more dangerous, gritty time. New York was literally falling apart in 1975. The budget was in the gutter. Gerald Ford had just told the city to drop dead. You didn't wear your nice jewelry outside. It was very dangerous and not in a different, it's not that way now. It's much more, there's danger, but it's just not the same. And I wanted to evoke that, but as a backdrop without it feeling too on the nose. Like this is just where the story happens. But I did a lot of research about the time. I read a lot of novels set in the era, like Will Hermes has this great book called Love Goes to a Building on Fire, and it's a history of the music scene in the 70s through his eyes growing up in New York. But it's not just punk, it's punk rock, it's Latin music, it's jazz, it's the avant-garde. And I really picked up on that, and I wanted to really show that as much as I could and just show how dangerous the city could really be, but also how vibrant it was.
Yeah, I think there is something to be said for the creativity that came out of that, the lawlessness, which was dangerous for citizens, but also was inspiring, like to the punk scene, like you said, the Latin music scene, the soul music scene, the hip, the early foundations or origins of hip hop come out of that 1975, 1978, going into the 80s sort of New York, where, like you said, New York was dangerous. As somebody who loves the city and has traveled there, in the early 2000s, I can only imagine what it was like back then. And reading Secret Identity really did put me in that place, because I love New York films from that period. Like I mentioned Serpico, but The Godfather, Prince of the City, Seven Up, stuff like that. And it really had that grimy, gritty, anything is possible. Someone might just get set on fire New York feel, which is sort of missing a little bit, on the Uptown train coming out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, not really there anymore.
No, I mean, it's like I got yelled at by a crazy person the last time I was in New York, but it didn't have that same joie de vivre that the 1975 crazy person had.
Different vintage.
Another I'm sorry. Yeah. Another thing I wanted to ask about is Carmen Valdez is, is an incredibly vibrant character, an incredibly interesting character. And I don't think this is giving anything away. It's also a character that identifies as queer, and
Mhm.
I thought that was a really brave. No, I'll say brave. That was a really strong choice for that time period. Because 1975 New York, even though it's New York, even though it's a metropolitan, sophisticated city, there was still an incredible amount of animus toward
Yeah.
LGBTQ plus folks at that time. So I was wondering, was that a choice that came naturally from that, just the way the character grew as you wrote her, or was that something you had in your mind that you wanted to try to tackle when you started the book?
That's a great question. I think as writers, we open ourselves up and allow these characters to show up, but then, the responsibility is on us to make sure we tell their stories as thoughtfully as possible. And that's really what I experienced with Carmen. She kind of walked through my mind. I knew I wanted to write a comic book noir. I knew I wanted it to be a murder mystery. I knew I wanted it to be set in a different era to kind of show the contrast between comics today and comics then, the contrast between New York today and New York then. And then Carmen showed up to me and she represented someone I knew, like so many friends I had, Cuban American upbringing, queer, and also kind of, like just a person I knew. But I also I have not lived that experience. So I had to be really thoughtful about how I wrote it. And that just meant, opening myself up to sensitivity readers, reading outside of my own experience, which is something I try to do anyway, but you also want to be thoughtful about it. And also one thing I feel strongly about is that it wasn't my place to tell her defining experience in that space. It's just not my story to tell. And it's a mystery story, and she is a queer character in that story. And I think that's important, in terms of just diversifying our protagonists and having meaning, inclusion and being thoughtful about who's starring in our books. But I took the notes too. I think a lot of times people throw around the term sensitivity reader as like a band-aid or as an excuse to do whatever you want, but it doesn't matter if you don't take the notes. And so, I had a lot of great readers that gave me great feedback, and I changed my book accordingly to reflect that. And I think it's important to do stuff like that.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. Like with Razorblade Tears, where I did a lot
Yeah.
of research about LGBTQ plus folk, and I had sensitivity readers, authenticity readers, beta readers, what do you want to call it? And like, you have to want to do the work. You can't go in with a preconceived notion. And I strive always to write characters, not caricatures.
Right.
And so I definitely understand like wanting to get it right. And again, that's not my lived experience. And so I don't want to presume to speak for anyone in that space. But at the same time, I do want to tell a story, and I think it makes it more interesting if you can include more people in your stories. And
Yeah.
so, I know like Blacktop Wasteland was a hyper masculine book, and I kind of wanted to broaden the umbrella a little bit. So, yeah, it's a tough. It's funny because I say that because Bug is a hyper masculine character, but I try to give him some frailty, but people don't
He's
think of
got a
Bug as a
soft
frail character.
side. He's got a
But yeah, he got
a little
his.
bit of a
He
little
loves his kids,
marshmallow
man. He
inside.
likes biscuits. When
Yeah.
he's not. Yeah, when
Yeah.
he's
And
not
I'm
slamming
glad you
somebody's head
mentioned
in the
that.
car door. He's a teddy bear.
Yeah, it's funny because I think when you were working on Razorblade Tears, we were talking about what our books were, and there's some thematic overlap, and I think it's important to be thoughtful about how you approach your story. And I always hear writers, especially online, saying, "Well, I should be able to write whatever I want without any restriction," and no one's saying you can't write what you want. It's whether you want to do it well and you want to do it in service of the story and you want to be thoughtful about it. You have to do the work. That's all.
Yeah. I have a lot of writers that will message me. It's like, hey man, I want to write a black character. It's like they want my permission. It's like
Yeah.
I can't give you permission. I give you advice.
Yeah.
You can write whatever you want to write, but you have to do the work. You have to do the research, and you have to be prepared for the fallout. You have to be ready. Not everybody's gonna like your interpretation, but if you did the work, if you made the characters as honest as possible, then let the chips fall where they may. But I wanted to ask you something else about Secret Identity, in so much as that inside world of comic books and that sort of really, rollicking, wild frontier of the 70s. Every time I read the book, and I've read it 3 times, I
Oh,
kept
thank you.
thinking about, man, this is how Stan Lee. Oh yeah, I love the book, man. I love comic books, and so that's just right up my wheelhouse. But I kept thinking this 75, I can see Carmen running into Stan Lee at a party on down on the Lower East Side with a bunch of other wild, crazy comic book artists and writers, and you really did a great job of evoking that. I don't want to say subculture, but I guess that's the best way to say it. That sort of subculture, that idea of, hey, we're gonna write about superheroes and in a way that's not pedantic, in a way that's more more real. I don't say realistic, but more that people can connect with. I love the idea. Of course, anybody who's a comic fan knows the story about Stan Lee talking about Spider-Man and how he couldn't cash a check that was made out to Spider-Man, and the way that they were thinking about comics in a different way at that time. And I thought you really kind of captured that with Carmen and with the links. And I guess my question is like, what do you think? I mean, comics have changed an incredible amount, but do you think there's still that sort of wild frontier spirit, especially independent comics?
I think so, for sure. I mean, there are books that, I'll crack open an old book and it'll get to me in the same way, or a new series, whether it's superheroes or memoir or a different kind of fiction. I think, a lot of times people confuse comics with a genre and they kind of just clump everything together, but it's not really a genre. It's a medium. It's a way to tell a story in the way that movies or cinema are a medium, or audiobooks, or novels. And I love that you got that, because the big thing for me was to not make the book feel like a Wikipedia entry, like where it's like, oh, Jim Starlin, who was born here and did this and did that. I didn't want the reader to get that. I wanted the reader to feel like they were in the room with Carmen, and they'd hear names and they'd hear titles and they'd hear like, oh, Jack Kirby. And I wanted them to think, oh, who's Jack Kirby? And then kind of go and research and then maybe get pulled into comics. And if you're like us, where you're a fanatic and you know all those names, right, I wanted it to kind of reignite that passion. I wanted her wonder to be infectious, because for me, I love the contrast for the Pete books. I love the contrast of Miami, this paradise, and Noir. And for Secret Identity, I love the kind of 4-color wonder of comics paired with this darkness. And that was really the goal. But I'm glad. I wanted it to feel like if you're reading the book, you could think, wow, did this happen? Like, could this have happened? And the answer is it probably could have happened, but I wanted to be accurate enough to feel that way.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about the comic side of it, and that's, like you said, I'm a fanatic, I'm a comic fan,
we got to go to a comic shop together.
Bill Finger and Bob Kane, and oh man, those. Anybody that's listening or watching, I'm a comic fan. I had the Muhammad Ali versus Superman comic when I was a kid.
Oh wow!
My dad had got it from me. I wish I still had it now. Oh my god!
It would be worth something.
Anyway, on the other side of the coin, it's an incredible. Secret Identity is an incredibly moving and sometimes dangerous mystery, and I thought you did an incredible job of differentiating it from the Pete Fernandez stories, which tend to be a little bit darker, a little bit more, in my opinion, a little bit more on the heroic, nihilistic side. Whereas with Carmen, she's not a private detective. She's not a private investigator. She's just someone who's pushed against the wall, and she has no choice but to solve this mystery. So again, I'm going to reference Pete a little bit here. With Pete, it's like, hey, he's a private detective. Here's his job. With Carmen, it was sort of just a regular person. And I like books like that, where regular people become the protagonist in a mystery or a crime novel. And so with her, did you take care to like create situations that were dangerous for her as an amateur, I guess? Because it felt like that. I always felt very concerned for her throughout the book.
Yeah.
And so I guess what I'm asking in a roundabout way, was that intentional? Because I always felt like, oh girl, don't go in there. Oh my God.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that. Yeah, it was intentional. I think with Pete, there's a lot of, I think when we have a series character, we kind of project a little bit. You're like, Pete is kind of like what I wish I could do. I wish I could like take a swing at the guy and be the hero. And even though he's not an action hero by any means, he gets beat up a lot, but he is much more prone to taking risks and doing stupid things. Whereas Carmen is like the other side of the coin. She's much more put together. She's very driven. She's very organized. Then Pete has his demons. He's an alcoholic. Has issues with his relationships with his dad, a lot of dad issues. But Carmen is much more put together, but she's also a regular person. And so the challenge is, what can I yank away from her that will compel her to take these risks? And the solution is take away her heart, and her heart is comic books, and her heart is the Lynx, this character that she worked on for years and years and years until she had her shot. She took her shot and then found it stolen, and that was what really propelled her to be this detective. But yeah, the risks have to be a little bit more realistic, because she's not a PI, she's not used to getting shot at, but she still, I think she surprised me while I was writing her. She took some risks I wasn't expecting, like in the climax at the end, and in the way she kind of sidesteps the cops that are investigating the murder. Like she becomes a little more unafraid because she's so desperate to reclaim this idea. So I think and that to me, like, I don't know how you feel about this, I'm curious, but I have a very specific definition of what noir is, and I think noir has become this like overused marketing term. But for me, noir is when you're pinned into a corner and you have to make a primal decision to either survive or cover up something you've done wrong. And then the story becomes, how does this person dig themselves out of this hole? And usually they don't. And so that's why I really wanted to inject much more noir into Secret Identity, because she's basically pinned into a corner and she has to fight her way out. It's very primal.
Yeah, for me, noir is always relatively good people doing relatively bad things for what they think is the right reasons. And
Right.
with Carmen, I really felt that. Like, I felt like there was this thing, because it's her desire to solve this mystery is not altruistic. It really is, I want the credit for what I've done. And she deserves the credit, but there is a sense of, and the way I got it, a sense of obsession a little bit. She's obsessed with comic books. And so that obsession drives her to solve the mystery. It's not so much of, it's not the classic, as we said, not the classic PI where, I've got to solve this mystery because justice needs to will out. It's, I got to solve this mystery because if I don't, no one will ever know that I did what I set out to do. And so it's not as, as charitable. And I thought that was cool. I thought that made her more interesting. She's not this vanilla cookie cutter character. She's really somebody who wants something and is like, okay, I've got to do these things that may be against her nature to achieve that. While I was still talking about it,
she's not a tainted
I
knight.
wanted to ask you. No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
Talking about the police in this, I'm always, for me as a writer, I'm always concerned about how much, especially when I do crime novels. I'm working on something different now. My character's a sheriff, so it's the opposite. But I'm always concerned about how much do I involve the police? Like, how much do the police get sidestepped, as you said earlier? And I thought you found a really good balance with that, where there is a police detective in here, and I'm not going to give anything away, but he's almost like her Javray, from Les Miserables. And he's like a dog with a bone with this. And I thought you really did a good job of creating these secondary characters. And so speak a little bit about the supporting cast around Carmen. I think there's some really cool, interesting characters in that milieu.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I mean, I love the meaningful cameo, like the supporting cast member that you just want to keep seeing more of. And the Detective Hudson, I didn't want to do your typical, like, no, like just steel-jawed 50-something Irish cop. I wanted it to feel different, and I wanted the character to be driven and believable. And also, like, I think when you read Hudson, you kind of want to be on her side. Like, she just wants to solve the murder, and Carmen is trying to obfuscate and make it challenging. And that's the trick. I think with something like this that's woven into history, you can fall into the trap of telling archetype characters. Like, Carlisle the boss could have very easily been like a J. Jonah Jameson type, but I wanted to inject some heart into him and make him feel more than just like the curmudgeonly boss. And Doug Detmer could have just been like the difficult artist, but I wanted to add a little more pathos to him and a little more tragedy to him and a little more kind of winking knowledge. Like he's the one that, without spoiling anything, he figures out that Carmen's the one sending him notes. He's very smart and he's very talented, and we all know creators like that who just kind of get kind of trip themselves up but are still very gifted. And I love Molly. I love Carmen's roommate. Like, she's like her friend, and Carmen's not sure she wants to be friends with her, but she ends up being there for her in her most trying time. And I just tried to, like, I wanted to make them all as three-dimensional as possible, no matter how much screen time they had, which I think is hard. And you do this so well too. It's just like you want them to feel
you did a
believable.
job with that. I think any mystery or crime novel is only as good as its supporting cast, and And if your supporting cast is strong, it rising tide lifts all boats. And they're an incredible cast of characters that feel real. They don't feel like I said, they don't feel from central casting. They feel like real strong individuals, especially that artist, like you said, where I felt his pathos. I felt, I thought it was interesting, and I don't know if you saw this, but I was reading it. I felt like Carmen's journey was a little bit subconsciously, maybe, your journey from an independent publisher to a larger publisher with Flatiron. We're both on Flatiron Books, and I can't speak for your experience, but I know with me going from an independent publisher to Flatiron, I identify with that with Carmen. It's terrifying. It's terrifying, but it's also the thing that you want the most. It's the pathway to the thing that you want, which is being a full-time writer, which is what I wanted the most. And I wonder, like, now that you think about it, is that something maybe subconsciously was in your writing, or is that something that I'm just reading into it that's not there?
No, I think you're very right. I think look, when you and I moved, you did it first. When we moved from the small press to Flatiron, it was a complete game changer. I would talk to Kelly and I'd say, "Oh, I need to check on this reporter, or I need to do this," and she'd say, "You don't need to do that. You have a team now. You have like a publisher that will do these things for you and support you and get your book out there in a way that indies just can't. They just are they just are smaller staff." But I think I could relate to Carmen's anxiety. I could definitely relate to her journey, like being alone in New York, moving to New York to pursue this dream of comics. Like, I could relate to her sitting in an editor's office and just picking the editor's brain because she wants to absorb everything and kind of get her when she gets her shot, she is ready. But yeah, I definitely had a lot of anxiety. Just kind of, this was it's funny because it made a few like best debut lists or like notable debut lists, like, or uprising star lists, even though it's like my 7th book. But it is almost like a first novel. Like, it's the first one at this level. And so I felt a lot of pressure, but I really wanted, I guess I really wanted to treat it like a bit like my movie, like a movie, almost like this. I'm going to really overthink every aspect of it because it needs to hit. And I'm sure you felt this with Blacktop and maybe a little bit with Razorblade, but you just want it to really land.
Yeah, I mean, with Blacktop, I've told a story, and we're here to talk about Secret Identity, but I will mention a little anecdote about Blacktop. With Blacktop, I really felt like the story, I identified with the story Bruce Springsteen tells about Born to Run, where it's like, I got to put everything I got into this because I don't know if I'm gonna get another shot. I don't know if I'm gonna get another chance, and if this doesn't hit, then I'm on the scrap heap. And so you throw everything you have into it. You really, put all your heart into it. And if you're lucky, like I was, it connects with people. And so, yeah, you gotta, and I think you did that with Secret Identity, to the 9. I think the themes and the ideas, I for me as a reader and someone who knows you, and we've been lucky enough to be friends, I can feel the passion for comics, for the art form, not the genre, like you said, not the genre, but the art form, the medium, and not just the art form itself, but the people behind it, because the art form is only as strong as the people who create it, and the people who create it are incredibly talented, incredibly interesting people, and you really brought that whole feeling to the fore. I think if you write about something that is important to you, people can feel it, and I definitely can feel how important comics and comic art are to you. And so, like I said, Secret Identity, it's one, like I said, I've read it 3 times because I read it the first time as an arc, and then I actually bought the final copy.
Thank you.
And I read it again, and then I recently read it on a trip. But I think it's, for me as a writer, as a reader, it's just a really great story. It's a really interesting story. I'm a country boy, grew up in Virginia, in Southeastern Virginia, and so that idea of talking about old New York is always fascinating to me. But as a writer, it really opened my eyes to what you can do within the form. I'm not going to say I'm going to put illustrations in my next book, but the way you did it, it worked in a way that gave me confidence to do something a little different with the book I'm working on now. And so, just for kicks and giggles, I'm doing a thing where every 8 chapters, I'm stopping the book and doing like an intermission where we're doing like a third person omniscient narrator where he's talking about the different people in the town, because the book is based around a serial murder, and so how those people are are dealing with this and how that is then reevaluate their impression of the town. I don't know if I'd have had the courage to do that if I hadn't read a book like Secret Identity or some other books that have really pushed the narrative form. So for me as a reader and a writer, it's a fantastic novel.
Wow.
Another thing I
Thank
wanted
you.
to ask
Thank
real
you so
quick,
much.
while
Thank
we
you.
still
Like,
got
that just
this
means the
period of
world to me.
time. Oh, you're welcome, man. You're welcome. I mean it, man. I really do. I'm always trying to learn from people that I admire, and I learned a lot from reading your stuff. So
Oh,
it
same.
means the
I
world
mean,
to
I
me.
picked
Another thing I wanted to ask.
Blacktop and Razorblade. I picked those apart. You know, that just reminded me of like reading George Pelecanos or Dennis Lehane for the first time. Like that energy, that kind of verve, that raw, you know, just tires on the street. Like it just, I can't describe it well. It just like feels like very primal and intense in the best way. Like just like real crime.
That's a very I'm very moved by that. Thank you very much. That's an incredible compliment. I really appreciate
The
it.
truth.
I wanted to ask thank you, brother. I appreciate it, man.
Mhm.
I guess I want to ask, like with Carmen, with the way the book ends, and I'm not giving anything away, but I hope this isn't a spoiler, but have you given any thought to maybe her reappearing somewhere else or coming in like being a recurring character or something, or maybe doing something else with her? I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I was just curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm working on a sequel. I'm working on a modern day sequel to Secret Identity. It's going to be, you know, the other side of the coin. It's going to be set today during the pandemic. It's going to have a new protagonist, this cartoonist who does memoir graphic novels. She does like New Yorker illustrations, but once upon a time she wanted to break into superhero comics, but for whatever reason it didn't resonate. And then she had a kid and she, you know, kind of went a different way. But she always talked about her passion for this really obscure superhero from the 70s called the Legendary Lynx, and how if the opportunity ever arose, she would love to draw that character.
Oh, wow. That is...
And so then there's an announcement, like a deadline announcement. Triumph Entertainment relaunches, is going to do a show based on the Lynx. And there's a social media uproar saying, we got to get this artist on this book. And so she takes the gig and starts drawing the new Lynx comic. And she starts getting these anonymous messages from someone that says, you got to look into this book, this character, because there's much more to who created this character than you think. And she starts digging into the story behind the Lynx, and she gets pulled into this mystery. And of course, Carmen shows up eventually. Carmen's a supporting character in the book, but it really picks up right after kind of thematically where Secret Identity leaves off. And it's a thematic story. It's about commodification of art. It's about what we do with our ideas and what it means to have an idea now when everything is option and everything is a TV show, everything is a movie. You know, it's like multi-platform media. But at its heart, it's about fandom versus art.
Right.
I hope. I hope I make it land.
That sounds great, man. Oh no, that sounds great. I love that. I love that. That sounds incredible, man. And
oh, thanks.
I don't know, man. Like I said, I love the Pete Fernandez stories. Yeah, I love the Pete Fernandez stories. I love your versatility, man. You have a lot of versatility, and you know, and your ability to shift between genres, between mediums is like I said, I admire it. I'm in awe of it sometimes because, as you know, we've been talking about doing some projects together, and it's different. It's different when you have to work within a different medium. It's challenging, but it's also really rewarding, and you make it look really easy. So
you're gonna be great. You're gonna be it's gonna come to you like
a lot of people don't have. So
you're gonna be great. Yeah, I can't wait to read a comic by you, or yeah, it's gonna be amazing. And thank you. Yeah, I like to keep myself interested. I don't like to be bored.
I really appreciate, bro. Yeah. I mean, it's funny, man. We are on the same publisher. We share an agent, and I think I can speak to this that our agent is someone who really does push us to broaden our creative wings, so to speak, in very different directions. But also, like I said, it's also challenging, but really, really rewarding. It's something, man. As a creative person, man, it's like I think, like, again, I can't speak for you, but for me, wanting to be a writer was always like one goalpost, and then all these other goalposts have showed up because of the writing. You know, writing has taken me places that I, you know, never thought would be able to go, and you know, seeing someone like you who's able to take that and do it in multiple different disciplines. It inspires me. It's like, well, I don't mean like, oh, if Alex can do it, I can do it. I don't mean like that. It's like, oh,
It's
man,
true. If I can do it, you can do it.
myself the same way. So,
it's funny. Yeah, it's funny
man,
because Josh's our agent is always saying, man, you and Sean keep me busy because we're always doing stuff. We're always trying new things. And I mean, for me, this as well as anyone, you have to sacrifice to get your writing done. You have to sacrifice. I don't play video games. I don't watch as much TV. I don't do as much of the things I used to do as like a 20-something. But this is the dream. Like, this is what I wanted. This is what I was sitting in my room reading comics and just praying for this opportunity. And I will sacrifice to make it happen. And I know you will too. And that's kind of what goes into it.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, man. You do sacrifice a little bit. You don't go out as much. You may not do this and that, the other thing. But, the ability to say, hey, I'm a full-time writer. And, people are connecting with my work. I never feel as alive as I am when I'm writing, save for maybe one or two other things. I'm so connected when I'm writing. And I can tell when you're writing Secret Identity that you're in that same headspace because it leaps off the page. It really does. Like I told somebody the other day, I said it's so New York grimy. Like I can smell the subway when I read the book. So
that mission accomplished. Yeah, no, it was such a trip to write. I had such a great time writing it, and I loved every minute of it. So much so that when I finished it, I felt a great sense of sadness. Like when when you do that final edit and the copy edit and you send it away, I was like, man, that's done. I can't hang out with those characters. And then I decided to write a sequel because I want to keep in that world.
That's interesting you said that, man, because I felt the same way at the end of both Blacktop and Razorblade. Like, oh man, it's like I always play it with the idea of creating an S.A. Cosby shared universe. So
yeah,
I
me too.
Talk to those characters again because it's you spend a year and a half with these folks, these characters, and they become real. Like the character I'm working on now, Titus Crown, is one of these characters where it's like, oh man, he's an interesting dude. He's got layers. He's deep, and I don't know how it's gonna end, but it's like, man, I'd like to talk to him again once this is over. So I definitely feel that, man. I definitely do. So I guess we'll ask John to come back and see if there's any questions in the chat, and we'll go from there.
Thank you so much, Sean. That's great.
Thank everybody
question.
for putting up with my my weather-related issues. Oh man, no, this is a pleasure, man. I can't wait to see you in person, brother. I'm coming up to New York for the Edgar, so hopefully we'll be able to run into each other.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'll see you then.
So we've got some good questions in the crowd. So Marjorie wants to know, this is for both of you. When you're at that point in the writing process where you just want to bang your head against the wall, what is it that gets you through that and keeps continuing? Let's start with Alex.
A lot what keeps me going is, deadlines are a great motivator, but also I just take little breaks. I'll step away from the computer for a minute and do something that has nothing to do with writing, like wash dishes or, take a walk, listen to music. Music is super helpful for me. I can't listen to music while I'm writing, but I will listen to music while I'm thinking about writing, and that always gets me charged. And one thing that really helps is reading something I love, like something I've read before, like Dennis Lehane or Megan Abbott or Laura Lippman, like authors that get me jazzed as a reader. If I just dip my toe into that, it gets me excited about doing the writing myself.
How about you, Sean?
Yeah, for me, I'm similar to Alex. I'll step away from it. I'll go lift weights. I'll go for a hike. I'll go make dinner. Wrap your mind around it too much. You know what I'm saying? It's like trying to hold on to a wet bar of soap. The more it's gonna try to slip away. And so I like to relax a little bit, let my mind kind of just go with the flow.
All right. So Erica wants to know, this is an interesting question. Where'd it go? What is the best thing that you have spent money on as a writer? How about you, Alex?
The best thing, I have this soft spot for just buying myself old comics or old books. Like I'll see something that I read as a kid and I'll just rebuy it because I don't have them anymore. I lost my comic collection when I was in my 20s because I didn't keep up with it. And yeah, I'll buy like books about comics or books about writing or history books. And yeah, I just buy myself books. Very exciting, but like treating myself, like after I do something, like finish a project or stuff like that. And I've bought probably way too many AirPods that have been worn out over the pandemic.
And so what are some of the things, so Sean has popped away, I will keep an eye out for him to pop back in, but we'll keep going. So what kind of stuff gets edited out of the book during the editing process?
That's a great question. You know, one of the things, we had the comic book interludes, which I think were important, and then the main prose story with Carmen, but I also had a bunch of other interludes that were in the initial draft, like articles written in different times. Like one was an academic article that kind of set up like whatever happened to the Legendary Lynx or Triumph Comics. Then there was a Wizard magazine. Wizard magazine was like a big comic book magazine in the 90s and 2000s. So like it was like a faux Wizard magazine interview with the boss from Triumph in the 90s. So it was like historical documents, and it was very James Ellroy, and I probably went too far. And Zach, my editor, very wisely said, look, let's keep it to Carmen and the comics. And then he made a great call by doing that. And then there was one scene towards the end of the book that I wanted an Oracle type character, like someone from comics who kind of nudges Carmen in the right direction. And I thought it would be really neat to have a real person, like an actual comic book person who had, so I settled on this creator who had passed away, but it just wasn't working and it felt a little too on the nose. And so I brought back another supporting character, and it actually ended up working out a lot better. So I think sometimes you just have to it's all about killing your darlings. Like I really was fond of that scene and I was fond of those interludes, but it worked so much better without them. So,
are any of those interludes anything that you'll be able to repurpose for the sequel?
I think I might use them in the comic book, like in the graphic novel, like having a lot of these academic looks at the character might fit better if you're reading a comic book.
So Sean, the question was, what kind of stuff as you're writing, what's the stuff that kind of gets edited out throughout the editing process?
Can you hear us?
No. Okay. Oh, and we should have lost him again. Okay. So let me pull questions back up. Okay. So Marjorie wants to know, are you looking forward to BoucherCon this year? Because she says she can't wait.
I am. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody. It's been a long pandemic. I've got 2 young children, so I haven't really done that many live events. We did one launch at the Strand this year for Secret Identity, but I've kind of kept my live events to a minimum. But I'm really excited to kind of see my crime fiction fam in person safely. Yeah,
that's one of the great things about being able to do the in-store stuff again, is just to be able to see people again. Like we got to see Joe Lansdale last week, and Joe's
awesome.
been to the store. I mean, he's been to the store for like every book, and we know Casey, and we know the whole family. So it was really great. Like having him actually in the store made it feel like there was some semblance of like normal in the world again, which was really great.
Yeah, I mean that the anxiety of COVID is going to take a while for all of us to shake off, but it's going to be good to just start seeing people.
Okay, there we go. Sean, can you hear us? Maybe.
Can you hear us? I want to say this before my signal drops out again. Yeah, I want to say this before the signal drops out again. Thank you so much for having me. Alex, this was wonderful talking to you.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you for Murder by the Book for having me here, man. It's a pleasure. I can't wait to see you again in person. Thank you for everybody that was listening. Our storm is kicking up like a lot worse than it was earlier, so it may drop me out any second. So I would just wanted to say thank you guys again for having me. It was a pleasure, and I'm gonna have to, I think, sign on.
Thanks, Sean. You're the best.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. So I think yep. So there he goes. So you mentioned that you're working on the sequel. Do you have anything else coming up that you want to mention before we head out for the night?
Yeah, I'm working on this comic book with NPR's Planet Money podcast, and they did a series of episodes about trying to buy a comic book superhero, and of course nobody sold them a superhero, so they took this public domain character called Microface who has audio powers, and this means audio, I guess, but but then they wanted to create a comic book, and so they tapped me to write it, and this great artist Jamal Igle is doing the art, and it's coming out from NPR. I never thought in my wildest dreams I would write an NPR comic book. So and then I've got another novel announcement coming up that'll be coming out later this year that should be pretty cool.
Very cool. Perfect. So for anyone who might have tuned in mid-conversation, we have been chatting with Alex Segura, whose newest book, Secret Identity, has just come out. We do still have some signed copies left if you've not picked up your copy. And as Sean mentioned, he has been having some weather issues, so we were also chatting with Sean Cosby, whose most recent book, Razorblade Tears, comes out in paperback on Monday. If you missed any part of our chat, you can rewatch it on Facebook and YouTube once we're done. You can also check back. We chatted with Sean and Alex at some point in the last year about Sean's book, Razorblade Tears. So that's up there as well. At this point, I can't keep track of like who we talked to when, because
I'm just always here.
Yeah, which is great. And we've also done lots of great stuff with Alex. So that's all up there. Alex, it was so good to see you, even virtually. I hope by the time the next thing you have comes out, we can actually do it in person and get you back to Houston and see you in the store.
We will. I can't wait. You guys are amazing. And thanks for all the support and for having me tonight. Thanks, everybody.
You take care. Have a good night.
Good night.